Hello and welcome to another Sacred Wisdom podcast with me, Rebecca Parks, my co-host Chris Clifford, and our special guest Simon Parks, who's going to talk to us about portals, which is our monthly spiritual topic for March and April. So, Chris, over to Chris.
Okay, hello everyone, welcome. Simon, we're going to start with the basics. What is a portal?
Well, first of all, it's lovely to be back doing topics that mean something to so many people. It's great to be in-house because I don't have to go through the bio or the resume. It was very straightforward. Portal is a doorway. So let's just start with that, because so many people genuinely get confused because of what's shown on cinema, Hollywood, perhaps books, or just general chit-chat, as we say, on the internet. So let's start off with straightforward. A portal is a doorway. Okay.
Becky, you're on mute.
Sorry. Okay, so what's the difference between a portal and a gate? Because that's the next question. And if a portal is a doorway, where to? What's the difference between a portal and a physical doorway?
Not a lot, because a portal takes you from one location to another. So in the physical world, it takes you from one room to another, or it can take you to another time and another place. A gateway, we have what we would call Americanization and Britishization, because a lot of the science around this started with the British, and then the Americans came over. So in terms of dominating the topic, having the resources, having the technology. So often we have a word which is transposable between a wide range of same realities. If we have a gate, we're moving towards the term a gatekeeper, although a portal can be guarded. So sometimes the American military will use the word a gate, meaning something that is open at some times and closed on another. The inference there is a portal is open all the time. That's not actually accurate. A portal can be closed. So we're going to, during this topic here, we're going to have a lot of words which are different but actually mean the same thing. Okay.
Okay, yeah, that's a good transition to the next question, which is, what is the difference between a portal and a wormhole? And do both serve as transportation, and are they limited by and to dimensions?
Right. A portal tends to be the straightest route between an entrance and an exit. A wormhole, which may probably be a more natural creation, whereas a portal is probably an artificial creation. A wormhole, as its name suggests, twists and turns and moves either through the same dimension or different dimensions. It doesn't necessarily mean that it would take longer to get to the same location than a portal, but certainly the distance traveled physically would be more convoluted. So again, a portal and a wormhole do the same job. The other difficulty we might have is with a wormhole, its dimensions might change and its location and exit might change. So a portal is much more likely to be a stable object. So if it was in location A 1,000,000 years ago, it's likely to be in location A now. A wormhole has the tendency to move around. Also, a wormhole has a tendency to be smaller. And that has issues for physical objects that might be going down it, or the speed at which you travel at. So there are technical differences between them, but they are both portals in a sense that they are a entry and an exit.
Okay, thank you. And as always, these questions are from our members that we've collected over the last month. So we do
Good.
have a lot of questions, and we're just
I'm trying to be quick.
I
So
know.
that
So yeah. So the next question, we're sort of drilling down with all the basic ones to start off with.
yeah.
How many types of portals are there?
Well, that's why a couple of questions now. You've asked one, and Chris has asked one, which led on to, you know, where do portals go, etc. But as we're in the standard stage at the moment, I'm saving that for later. So where do portals go? Literally, I can't say anywhere, but you could literally have a portal in one room of your house, which could open in the room next door. That's still technically a portal. If it's a constructed portal, then it's normally near a superhighway, in other words, where alien craft are associated, and would go off a bit like, you know, you would have a main roadway or a railway line or a railroad track that leads from one busy hub to another. So artificially created portals tend to be an opportunity to move from one location to another in a fairly straightforward direction and very quickly. So they would tend to be where the intelligence that's created that would have a wish to put it there. If it's a natural one, then it's more likely to be around the energies that have created that for perhaps ways we don't fully understand. Remember that a portal can have been built a very long time ago, and the original builders have long since gone, and then another spacefaring race discovers it, is able to activate it, and able to move it. So that's the portal in terms of where it goes as we would understand it from A to B. But there are other portals which become more complicated now. So for instance, don't please get this confused with holographic. So on this physical world, we are all fairly used to a bank, which places its assets in a metal cage, basically, or a metal box. But you can also have a portal that allows you to travel through a physical barrier. So in other words, there's a physical barrier between, let us say, the customer and the gold deposit, but the door can phase out of this reality. And we could conceivably say that that has created a portal, although it hasn't left the same space-time continuum. And we can then move through what was a physical object to where we want to be. That technically is still a portal. So we mustn't just imagine portals are opportunities to move through long distances or back in time or forward in time. Portals can actually be a barrier which can come and go. We used the word gate before, and that is something that I think in the last 30, possibly 40 years, the American military have got their head around in terms of some of the tech that's hidden on Earth and how do you access this. Okay.
Can I ask? I'm going to ask my own question. Oh, someone's doing some drilling outside.
Probably looking for a portal.
Yeah, they're certainly drilling holes into a wall.
There you go.
Yeah, very timely. So there are places where objects can be phased out in certain
Yes.
places. I'm thinking about a certain place in Scotland,
Yes.
Chapel.
Yes.
They can be accessed through maybe music or certain frequencies. So is that
Yes.
like a portal?
No, it's not a true portal, but it would fall within the purview of our discussion today. So I use the term at the door of a bank because that is a doorway. It's a portal through from one room to another. So that I'm happy with that. You're talking about objects that are phased out of this reality and pushed into the lower fourth dimension, that's not actually a portal, but it's actually moving an object from one reality to another without requiring a portal. So you artificially produce an energy field around that object, or you charge that object with the same dynamics that exist in another dimension. And then, like a piece of metal is drawn to a magnet, that object, once charged, will be drawn to the same frequency that it's emitting. So if you've got a Palladian craft that's come from the fifth dimension, it would have to change its frequency so that it could come here. And I'm not talking about, as an ET would travel. I'm talking about through portal technology. But a craft would be able to create its own temporary portal. So, and non-human entities, certain non-human entities can also have that device. So, no, I wouldn't suggest an object that can be phased out. That doesn't necessarily have to be a portal in that sense of the word. Would you use the word a hiding portal or a hidden portal? But that portal wouldn't exist once that object has traveled through out of this dimension. That gateway, shall we say, has gone. But you would have to have the frequency ability to reach into that higher dimension to reactivate that. And as you said, playing a certain, not the modern music, but the certain old notes before they were changed, the old hertz, that does travel up dimensions. Okay, that's really important. That travels up dimensions, and then you can, if you have pre-programmed an object, it will, come back like a boomerang in Australia. Okay.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So this question's about dimensions too. So what differences exist between same dimension transportation portals, like in space and time, and portals between dimensional realities?
Right. So on the argument there, we've got an individual, shall we just say, who's not replicated isn't the right word, but there are 3 or 4, same living environments layered on, hidden, whether it's all stacked up like a tower block or it doesn't really matter. This is less of a portal and much more of a living connection between the individual and a number of realities which exist in their own right. And if you are living in one reality and another reality, it's debatable whether you actually need a portal to access that, because you have the right to exist in however many. Therefore, you should have the right to be able to access that at any time without requiring the need of a portal. If you were an outsider, then you would probably need something like a portal to break into that time and space. And it doesn't actually matter whether the dual reality is ahead of time, same time, or behind time. If you're the same living person with the same frequency, you have the right internationally in the cosmic form to be able to access that at any time that you want. However, there are rules and laws that sometimes block it, so that you have maybe 20 versions of yourself, each trying to be the one version, that learns the fastest or succeeds. And if you were to pool your resources by getting all together, that's a bit of a cheat. And you haven't really learnt on an individual journey. So 9 times out of 10, you are not able to bilocate or to go wherever you are. Your individual life experiences are ring-fenced, firewalled off. And only then when you go back to source are they all put back together again to see what the next stage is.
Fascinating. Okay, so Is a portal geometrically limited, or can it be any shape? If
Ah,
different shapes, do they have different meanings or purposes, like a square
right,
versus a
right.
round portal?
So it depends what dimension it's in, because certain shapes have more efficacy in certain dimensions. So this is a third dimensional world, and a cube works very well, as the Orions would tell you. The cubes work very well in the lower fourth dimension as well, and that is why snowflakes and flowers which don't abide by that technology, they are more advanced, and they are perhaps more organic. We have to be very careful, because there are some things that geometrically a lot of people feel are better, and they talk about, sacred geometry. The problem is that a number of hidden organizations, elite esoteric groups, have understood that, and there are a number of banks, physical banks for money, and other locations which have used sacred geometry. Certain cathedrals or churches use it. Does that mean that it's necessarily good? No, it doesn't. So remember that a more advanced intellect than what's on the earth would have a far greater understanding of, sacred geometry. And the problem is, we've got the word sacred here, and I think that's a misnomer, and that's very confusing. And they can replicate that. And so if you are in a reality that has a certain frequency, then all of the structures in it will obey that type. If you are going to house an object that is not from your reality, then you have to choose a shape that resonates with the object you're housing, hence the Great Pyramid. Now, the Great Pyramid, although you've got, I believe it's feldspar or gypsum, which can create a triangular shape, it's called double spar or something. So it's not unknown on the earth, but the pyramid idea in a physical format has been brought here because the main pyramid originally housed a object which was from the lower fourth dimension, and therefore it required a pyramid shape because it was more comfortable within that. And it tended to have an effect upon the third dimensional energies, which no other object would have. So, for instance, I have talked about this about 7 years ago, where the company Gillette, the razor blade makers, produced a metal pyramid, the small one, that folded, and you could fold it up into a pyramid. And what you had to do is you would shave at the night, and then you'd put your Gillette blade into the pyramid, and lo and behold, in the morning, the blade was somewhat sharper, not fully sharp, but somewhat sharper. So the ionization began to wear away the dullness of the blade and sharpen it. That's not something that is taught in schools. However, Mr. Gillette or whoever was running the company realized that people weren't buying razor blades because they were self-sharpening. So that idea had to stop. A bit like selling a motor car that was self-healing. Oh, the engine's blown up, but don't worry, give it a week and it'll grow a new engine. In a world that's all about money and manufacturing, that ain't going to work. So certain objects have a completely different effect on Earth, but they more replicate where they've come from. Okay,
just to clarify with that, so portals can be different shapes, or portal entrances can be different shapes?
Well, they would right. A portal in a particular known location would be representative of the architecture used in that location if it's made by an intelligent being or an intelligent force. If that intelligence has spread out throughout the galaxy, then it would impose its portal technology on, say, another planet, and therefore that portal might not represent the the environment because they're an alien interaction or an alien injection into it. But however, on those circumstances, more likely the portal is hidden so that it can't be found, and therefore it would have to subsume the surrounding rock or the environment so that the portal would take on physically the aspect of the location it's in. But it depends who created it and whether source has created it, which does happen, or whether it's an intelligence, and that will dictate where the portal is. Remember, you have portals under the ocean as well, so let's not forget that. It might not come up, the portals that go down to the ocean bed. Okay.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So this next question came from our coordinator at drop-in meeting yesterday. And the question is, are there known best practices for working with portals? And coordinators asked this question because they said it's important to help members be aware. So if they choose to work with portals, that to understand any cautions or considerations to keep in mind for personal safety.
Okay. It's a bit grand to think that you can work with a portal. A portal literally is off or on. You can attempt to activate that portal or deactivate it. You can't do much else. So you can't work with it. It's not like a piece of clay. Today I'm going to make a nice jug, and then I'm going to smash the clay all up and I'm going to make a coffee cup. Highly dangerous, because we've talked about timelines. You know, if you were to make the choice, you came across a portal that was open, you are taking a huge gamble in case it's a one-way portal. You see, you can have, say, in a big country like Australia, you could have one location that takes you somewhere, and then 1,000 kilometers, or as we say in Great Britain, 1,000 miles, and you do in America as well, thank God, 1,000 miles the other direction, it's the return. But that might mean that when you go the other end, you've got to walk 1,000 miles to find the portal to come back. And it might be that when you enter the portal, you don't have the requisite coding and you are incinerated. So it isn't something you do. When the Jelly Mountains was opened up by the Americans, a number of people lost their lives because they were attempting to understand this ancient tech, and it's not something that we should play about with.
So you're talking about like maybe a portal on the earth and going through that, and I know that there are quite a lot of questions to do with that later, and what happens if one goes through a portal. But what about you know, our chakras are natural portals within our bodies, sort of connecting the spiritual and the physical. There's different connection points of the spiritual and the physical, and chakras can be opened and closed, switched on and off, and you know, they can be worked with. So on a personal level, one could work and perhaps would have a natural ownership over their own personal chakras. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, who's going to teach you to do that? I mean, I reckon someone who goes and I'm not being facetious. I'm answering the question straightforwardly. Someone who goes and lives at the top of a mountain for 25 years, yeah, they can probably do that, but they're not going to share that, because it could be turned into a weapon. That's the problem at the moment on this planet. Anything valuable like that ends up being used as a weapon. There are people who are gifted naturally. They don't have to do 25 years on top of a mountain, and that can happen, but they won't go telling anyone about it because they'll end up in some laboratory being prodded and poked with a stick. So there are people, but they're keeping it very much themselves. The wider question is more interesting, which is about the chakras, which the bad side have always tried to hack, and to some extent have successfully done so. But they are your property. Let me put it to you like that. They're yours, and therefore, if you have the ownership for it and you have the determination and the skill and the training, then you can do something with it. Yes, they are portals, but not in the same sense that we're discussing. It's a the chakras are a two-way connection to a higher location. It's got nothing to do with enemies, shall we say. It's very much an object that was natural, that was tampered with. And if you are able to keep the bad guys out, then you would have quite a considerable say over how you developed. The problem is that the chakras are seen as a very easy way to control the human race. You know, you have your emotions and you just do something with one chakra and you throw the body out completely. So again, it's something that we should do in secret and not spread it around. As an individual, you can have a portal to the Akashic records. You could have a portal to a planet. You can certainly, if you are of that background, you can have a connection to a spacecraft, portal to that. And remember that frequencies and sounds create portals, and that is what whales do. That's why there's been such an element to kill whales, because the bad guys know what whales do. Whales, by projecting that high frequency sound that whales can do, they open a portal. So sound waves do activate, and you talked about that earlier when you talked about in Scotland. We won't go into too much detail about that, but sound is a very important aspect of portal opening and closing. Okay.
Okay, so a follow-up question, because you've mentioned a couple of times for those who don't have the training, I would say most of us, and probably most people who are listening to this podcast, you know,
Sure.
have studied chakras somewhat, but we don't have the kind of training that you're talking about here. So kind of setting portals aside, because people may be listening to this and think, oh, I shouldn't work with my chakras. Can you kind of comment on that and an appropriate beneficial way to work with our chakras, whether it's tied to portals or not?
Yeah, so I'm not recommending you attempt to use your chakras as portals. What they can do, if you work with them properly, is they will override the controlling coding that's been placed over individuals. So chakras are a key, not just to the new age, but they're a key to unlocking your potential. And as long as you can block any attempt to hijack them or take them over, then a portal will vastly speed up your development. But depending on which chakra you're using, its authority will stay within the frequency. And they talk about colors, and colors are energy fields. They're light, but their energy is light. So if you put one, chakras should be balanced. So if you start working on one, then you're either going, if you're successful, you're either going to develop it or not. But if you develop it, it's now going to be out of sync with the rest of your chakras. Okay, so if you move it, you only want to change it very slightly. Otherwise, your physical body will be totally screwed. So what those that are adept in the arts will do is just move it very slightly. Then, you know, you start at the top if you want to and work down, or the bottom, work up, or the middle. Doesn't matter, as long as you're trying to keep a balance. Because if you don't keep a balance, then your body will fall apart. Okay.
Can I just add a bit to that as well? Because obviously people who are trained in spiritual healing or Reiki healing will have become used to working with healing energy that they can feel flowing through them and generally through their hands, and also using it to feel the energy centers of another person, the person who that they are working with. So, for example, when I trained to do the spiritual healing, it was working with the healing energy, and I could feel people's chakras and all the energies and any pain and any energy blockages and all the other stuff. And the idea was to work with that person energetically to help get their chakras in balance. But in so that's one aspect of it. So, but another one is that obviously our hands have chakras where the energy flows through, and technically that is a portal, is it not? Because that's where the energy doesn't come from oneself; it flows through, like one, like as a channel, literally, um, and that is basically working with a portal. So that's sort of a statement and a question, but connected with that, are our chakras connected? So are the portals within our body connected to our DNA? Because
Lots of questions.
there has to be physical, because I feel this is where our physical selves are connected to our spiritual selves. I feel it's through the way the
It has to be.
is
No,
presented through the
right.
chakras and the
Right,
way
okay. I'm going to
it all works
forget.
with
I forget
energy.
what you said. I'm sorry. I'm going to
Okay,
forget what
so
you said
I
first.
know. Sorry, I just.
Well, you of all people should know. Right. So it's sometimes impossible for an individual to heal themselves. And you generally take someone from outside. And you quite rightly said it, you place your hand a certain distance over a person. If you have the gift, and you certainly do, Becky, if you have the gift, then what you're doing is you are detecting where the issues are. And then you are using like a conjugated phase array, which means that you are bending the beams of energy into a slightly different way and putting an intention on it of good. So it's a bit like a laser beam. So you are bending energy or moving energy, and its intent, what that's about. So it actually carries your intent. So that phased energy, which is generally tends to be pulse, would carry your healing thoughts, and that would happen. So where you have documented where you have repaired broken bones yourself with that facility, that is because the intent that you said along that energy field reached the broken bone on both sides and caused it to knit together and grow. Okay, so hands are portals. What some alien races do is they have certainly have the reptilians do, and so do the mantids. I don't know about others, possibly the greys. I'm not sure if the little ones have, but I guess the taller ones do. They have a chip always in the left shoulder, which allows them to communicate with humans. So if a human who's obviously chosen by them in the sense that they didn't just turn up, in the cornfield one day and take someone and their dog. If this is an ongoing relationship, then if the person puts their hand on the left shoulder of the alien, and it's a hand, hence you can see the connection now when you talk about hand, then if that alien was to touch a sentient AI computer, such as an alien spacecraft, then the human will receive all that information through the chip in the left shoulder of the alien, through their left hand. Sometimes it's the right hand, depends. And so you are correct that you could describe a portal as the hand, but it's not technically so, but it generates a portal. So the hand in itself isn't the portal, but it is understood that it can create a change in the dimension of the reality that it's in to make a portal. But it wouldn't be you couldn't stand and point it 10 feet away. It wouldn't work. It would only work within a short space like that. What were the other questions that you pushed in with all that?
Well, it was okay. So it was more to do again with chakras in our
Right,
body, our spiritual body, and the connection between that and the DNA. So
right.
I was trying to really look at the interface points of our physical and non-physical self, our physical and spiritual self, because we're a blend of physical and spiritual, aren't we? We can exist in different dimensions at the same
What's
time.
what's the question, please?
So are chakras the portals and the connection between our physical and spiritual self?
Yes, that's the simple answer. Yes. Um, but that would be a very rude answer. With such a long question, you would want a longer answer. So basically, if you have a body and then you have a soul, could be soul A, soul B, doesn't matter what it is, then that body should be prepared for and in line with the frequency of the soul that's in it. That doesn't mean at the moment of birth you are, you know, something a bit special, because it's all shut down, and often things only activate when the time is right. You can have a whole argument about when is the time right, but basically then there are a ton of people on this earth who really ought to be in this position, but their brain is in charge. They've allowed their brain to run their world. They don't listen to the spiritual side at all, and as a result of that, the chakras are simply chemical glands working in a 3D world and doing that. Whereas if you bypass the brain and you deal directly with these very poorly understood objects, I'm not going to call them glands, objects, then you are able to do things with them that others can't. You either believe or you don't believe. Okay, does that cover the range, or was there something else you snuck in there?
Kind of. I also just snuck in the DNA connection.
Right, well, that comes in the same. It would be absolutely madness, I mean that, to put soul A into a body that's B, because the DNA didn't match the frequency of the soul going into it. So we've talked about this before. If you have a let's just say, look, a reptilian soul, and that goes into a human body as we understand it, but you haven't altered the frequency of the body to anything like what it needs to be, then that won't work. Now, with the DNA, you are looking at a long line of physical bodies that have contained that type of frequency for thousands of years, or you're looking where artificially the DNA has been changed or added to, so that the without compromising the overall structure of the DNA, so that it can work with a new group. And I've often talked about, you know, some individuals have more than one type of soul in their body. So you couldn't just have one set of DNA. You know, if you've got a Palladian and, you know, I don't know, someone from, I don't know, Arcturus, for instance, you'd have to have that DNA working with both of those frequencies, which will be different. And that's complicated and takes time. Remember, non-Earth humans don't talk in terms of money. It doesn't exist, but time, they say time is money. It isn't money, but time is what they don't have unless they're altering time, but that's only when they're on a project. So if they're on their day-to-day routine, shall we say, then they value time far more preciously than we do here on this planet. And that's because they understand time and they can manipulate it. So they look on time in a different way than we do. So the reality is that they won't do anything that that's not likely to work. So if you took a sheep and you want to clone it, that's child's play. It's the soul that goes in it. Now that's the point. If you clone a sheep, what soul goes in it? Now, the lower down the spectrum of intelligence you go, then the less important, the least important it is. The higher up you go, the more important it is, because the body is requiring a connection that allows it. It's a bit like a gauge on a railway line, a railroad line. You know, different countries have different gauges. Well, if you don't have the right gauge halfway along, all your wagons come off. That's the best way I can describe it. Okay.
Okay, I'll hand over to Chris so we get back on track with the
That's all right.
portal.
No,
Thank
that's
you. I
fine.
just wanted
Look,
to try and explore that.
you're
I
asking
know I'm trying.
questions that
Yeah.
others can't ask. That's fine. It's just that if you do it like that, I'm going to forget what you're telling me.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was a good diversion from portals, I think, and a very fascinating topic. So thank you. But we'll get back to portals and talk about geography. So are there spiritual portals located on Earth? What about the ley lines? And if so, where are these located, like Stonehenge, Sedona, and so forth?
Right. Right. Just because a place is like Stonehenge or Sedona, we shouldn't use the word spiritual in line with that. We shouldn't. If we're going to use the word spiritual, then I'm much happier use the inference that I've sort of passed on earlier, which is like the whales in the ocean, the big whales. That's much more of a spiritual portal. Or if you have a really beautiful, physically beautiful, secluded wood with very rare trees, there's been no construction there, and there's very rare flowers, well, there well could be a spiritual portal there, which allows entities whose job is to maintain that environment. Remember, whales in the ocean, their job is to maintain the Earth's balance. So there is a history on this planet of individuals whose job is to maintain what we take for granted. So we can't just use the word spiritual. If it's spiritual, then it's God-given. Frankly, it's created like that. Something like Stonehenge could be a traditional native spiritual portal there, but if so, it's been used because an object, a physical object created by an intelligence, has put a ring around it, which is in magic is a containing ring. So rings contain things inside them. Though we do have to be careful with Stonehenge. Lots of people misunderstand what Stonehenge is about. Avebury is more interesting because in Britain it's not a circle, it's what we call an avenue of stones, a little bit like the Great Pyramid that originally had crystals in an avenue going up the main staircase. So you can send energy down these stones, or you could send energy down the stones. Ley lines are not true portals, although they can end in a portal, and they just are a method to conduct energy that is not seen but could be felt. Either through the air, but more likely through the subsoil, the surface of the ground, the first 3 feet of the ground. So sometimes gifted people can feel a tingling sensation. You know, that's why divining with people with rods do quite well with objects on the ground. Okay.
Thank you. So, which portal is best protected in or on Earth by which power?
Oh, well, every portal is protected by America. America has the keys to most of them, the code keys. There are some that they haven't cracked and they just think, well, one day we will. Some portals have to be guarded to prevent anything escaping or coming in if it's a two-way portal. Portals on the surface tend to be less important because they're on the surface in terms of military. Portals on the surface tend to be more ancient and more historical, with a race that no longer exists, when there was no fear of being seen or viewed. Now, of course, things are hidden underground, or they're camouflaged, or they are phased out of reality. So I can't answer it because I genuinely don't know which is the best guarded, because if you were to sit down in the Pentagon, they would answer that question very easily and show you why. But if you were to go to an alien race, they would give you what's theirs. And, you know, so you can't put the two together. I think the best way to answer it is those portals that are considered the most dangerous or the most opportunity for disaster and danger. They're the ones that are decommissioned or blocked in some way.
Do wars happen over portals, like fighting for access to them?
Not as much as people would like to think. I mean, the Iraq War certainly had a portal as part of its treasure trove. The two poles, Iceland, Antarctica, Greenland, they are portals. They have portal technology. But there are some portals which don't have wars over it because nobody actually wants to take ownership of it, because what you do with them, they're too damn dangerous. If you run a building, a big office building, you have thousands of pounds or dollars or euros in upkeep of that building. So that is why President Trump wants to take control of certain countries, because he wants the upkeep of whatever is there, because he knows that America won't stop. It won't give up. It won't change its mind. It won't get bored or tired. So sometimes some things just need to be guarded with no return from an Earth perspective on it. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So what about the sun and the stars? Are they portals?
Yeah, the sun is a portal, but you have to have very advanced technology to be able to enter it. Stars have the potential for to be a portal. All stars do, because it's not taught in university, of course. Why would it be? But the relationship between a group of planets in a solar system, in a small grouping with its twin stars, there's always a black sun to the ordinary sun. Its relationship is really important. It's symbiotic relationship. One doesn't evolve without the other. So almost sort of a living consciousness in that group. You see, here on the third dimension, and we're still in the third, unfortunately, portals that are physical are trying to replicate a portal. So in other words, the physical world that we live in would attempt, to the best of its knowledge, I'm using my words carefully because it doesn't think, but to the best of its ability, it tries to create a portal. So when you get these typhoons or these whirlwinds, and you get them in America and countries that suck up into it and then throw you out, or you pull the plug on your wash basin and the water goes down, that actually is the best that the physical world can do to replicate a portal, because your whirlwind does indeed, if you get caught in it, lift you up, spin you out, and who knows. You see, we always think of, Alice in Wonderland going into portal, and of course, Dorothy in Kansas. So there was the whirlwind there, and the connection that the elite have always understood between the physical world of a portal. So you see a sort of portal technology that you use the best you can get, that's created by nature within a third dimension, purely without the consciousness to want to take it further. Okay.
I wanted to ask another question, but this brings to mind the Bermuda Triangle, and maybe, is that a portal? Is there a portal there? Is that why things disappear?
Yeah, there are a couple of places like that. It's not in the true sense of a portal as understood. It's more where something or somebody wants to draw stuff in and then close it off. I can't remember the flight, the six aircraft that were sent up to try to locate the aircraft that was originally missing. Their radio messages were received hours, and those planes never came back. But those radio messages from the pilots were received hours after their fuel would have run out. So we can only assume that they were taken many, many, many thousands of miles away. It took, radio messages travel at a certain speed. So I'm sure that the scientists in the Pentagon would have calculated the moment those messages were received, the moment that the airplanes disappeared from radar, and then for someone like that, it's quite a simple calculation to work out how many light years that those planes were before the message came back, because the speed of sound, the speed of radio waves. So not a portal that sits there all the time, no. Something far more sinister than that. And that is why all of the compasses and the electronic, the mechanical, because they didn't have damped down equipment that they have now, but the controls were useless. The compass would go spinning, which in a standby portal you wouldn't have. Now there are some portals which are temporarily created to allow individuals, either in the physical form or just their energy form, to travel. Now, if you're taking a physical body, you can't take anything metal with you. So if you are going to put someone in through the ocean in a portal, you can't have any metal objects. It has to be plastic. And that is why often people might find their watch left behind. They have missing time and they don't know what's gone on. And they find their watch or their jewelry or their ring. And you cannot take metal through. You might be able to take pure gold through, but certainly ferrous objects, you can't do it. Some of the earlier experiments with what we call the secret space program, where they were training these, they're not super soldiers. I mean, they are United States pilots, but they may not be American citizens, but they come under the auspices of that. And it took a hell of a lot of training. They'd have to put a plastic tube down their throat about that far, you see. And there was enough oxygen in that for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, because when they're being taken from one place to another, it's almost like a vacuum. There's no air, can't breathe till you come out the other end. And you can't take an oxygen tank like a diver because you can't do that. So we'd have a plastic tube down their throat. That was a few years ago. Maybe they've moved on. So portals have come in a whole range and shape of sizes and colors.
Okay, I've got another one here. So some people believe that we have been able to travel to the moon and Mars physically, and others believe we access them through portals. Can you tell us more, please?
Well, I wish more people would believe that. Both. You see, Mars is so close that you can get there in a few days or a few weeks or a few months, depending on your propulsion system. So you don't need to go into a cryogenic freeze chamber. You can get there relatively quickly. So a commercial operation wouldn't need a portal. But if you have portal technology, then clearly you would do it. There's obviously whistleblowers who talk about jump rooms. We have to be so careful here, because you can give the impression to an individual that they've been on Mars. You can give the impression they've been to the moon, and you can give them that screen memory or that fake memory, and they believe that they have and they've accessed this technology, etc., etc. But certainly there are portals. Alien spacecraft and human-operated craft have that technology. And if you think about Star Trek and the beaming from one ship to the planet, that's about sort of taking apart the cells of the body, sending it down a place of energy, and then reconnecting it. That's not actually a portal. So that does exist, but not the physical body. So they haven't got the ability to deconstruct your physical body and take you and reconstruct it. They have the ability to take your soul, your energy frequency, your consciousness from your body, because that's energy, not physical. They can do that. Or if they want to take your physical body, you have to go through a portal that does not break up your body. So it's literally like a long tunnel. And there are only limited distances that you can do that. So certainly you could go as a real physical human from this planet to Mars or the moon, no problem at all, by a portal. Yes, absolutely. And we've had latest stuff being released on the mainstream saying, yeah, there are bases on Mars and moon. And 10 years ago, you know, I talked about that. And we called it the Adam and Eve bases. And I'm not the only person. Not many people, but there are a few others who are genuine, who have talked about bases on Mars and the moon. And, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger starred in Total Recall, where there was a big mining operation in Mars. Well, that's exactly what's been going on. You know, it may be that the materials on Mars aren't as brilliant as you would have on Earth, but in a vacuum, you can do so much more. So a lot of fantasy is actually not. It's based in reality, but because we don't have portals demonstrated to us, and we're just shown spacecraft made out of what I would call tin foil, what Americans would call aluminum foil, we look at it and we think, well, how does that get anywhere? And as long as we're being lied to in this fashion, the vast majority of people can't make that jump to really appreciate the technology that's out there. If you're given a Model T Ford to drive, then that's what you think the technology is. And you can't imagine doing anything more than that. But as you are introduced to technologies that up the game, you then realize that more can be achieved.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So, Simon, are trees portals? And if so, what kind of trees? What do they connect? How does it work?
Probably the hardest question so far. Not in the sense that we're talking about today. However, trees have, as nearly everything does, has a consciousness, and anything that puts out tentacles, and trees put out roots, they can not just do what the scientists tell you, which is draw up water, they can communicate. So one tree could send out a message which 100 miles away, another tree would be able to pick up and identify, not a language, but that. So is that a portal? No, it's not a portal in the true sense of the word. It's using the medium of the reality that's in, so a third dimensional rock or a third dimensional earth, and it is sending a stream of energy which can pass through that and is only gradually deteriorated. So you know, if you were to fire a bullet through the Grand Canyon, it wouldn't get very far. But if you had the right frequency, it would pass through the rock. I mean, X-rays, for instance, will pass through some lead, and certainly through other objects. So the science is there, which says that the type of frequency can pass through solid objects. Well, as I said earlier, if you have a frequency, all you have to do is to use that as a carrier, and then you put the message on top of that. It's how that you connect that so the message doesn't get lost or scrambled. And hey, isn't that what they do with cable television? Light is the carrier, and then the information is carried within that, which puts audio and visual on your television. So they've had that for a long time. So yeah, trees can communicate with each other, but not in the true sense of the portal that we're discussing today.
Okay, thank you. Right, changing tack a little bit. When a grey alien enters someone's room at night and abducts them to take them
Yeah,
back to a spaceship or an underground base,
yeah,
what technology is used?
right. The alien would have the ability to phase out and then walk through a wall. And so it would go back to its fourth dimension, lower fourth dimension, which exists in the same space but doesn't, as a wall in an apartment, walks through the wall, rejoins this reality, and therefore can be seen again. That's not technically a portal. It's disassociating a cloned body. Okay. And we talked about if an individual is taken, it tends to be, in most cases, just their energy frequency. You can still think and see, and you don't even realize you're not in your body. It's very, very exciting and challenging, perhaps. But on occasion, an individual is taken, and you have experience of this, Becky, I know from what you know, that if you were to be taken, the person taking you would seek to find the thinnest medium between you and the spaceship. So, for instance, they would always go for a window. The thicker the wall, the more impossible it is to get you through it. So if you were in an apartment and you have memories, you would normally have the memory of going through the window, especially as glass contains water. And therefore, it's a very good medium to transport a person through in that technology, whereas a dense wall reaches a point where it's just not possible. That's why a lot of the underground bases, which are built by humans to prevent negative ETs accessing, are built of very dense materials. Porcelain or yeah, porcelain is something that they use with that. So they've learnt that ETs aren't infallible, and they have a limit to their power here on this reality.
Okay, thank you. So you mentioned there is a technology in the North and South Pole, but the question is, are these actual portals and gateways to the Earth's interior, and what about hollow Earth?
Yes, they are to the interior. One of them is a portal outside of the Earth. In other words, it'll take you outside. But the two entrances are indeed portals to use the word inner Earth. I'm quite happy with that. But within that location, there is another portal which is held. It's an artificial, held in a false reality, which will take you somewhere else. And the advantage of that one, and why people are so interested, is because it's big. It's very big. The ones that the humans have back engineered or been gifted are relatively small. We talked about the United States Eldridge. That was a ship, and that wasn't truly a portal. It was turned into a portal with the magnetic field produced around it, and with disastrous consequences. So military is always after a portal big enough to take an aircraft carrier through, which exist, but most portals are quite small. When the Hadron Collider opened a portal into the lower fourth dimension, it only managed to open it around about 1 millimeter in diameter. So it wasn't enough to bring anything through, but it was enough to have communication. So even the mainstream have accepted that a 1 millimeter diameter portal was opened between the Hadron Collider here on Earth and what they call the fourth dimension. It was actually the lower fourth dimension. It didn't do them any good because they wanted a much larger portal. Okay.
Well, on that note, how come it takes something so huge as the Hadron Collider to do all that effort and energy just to create a tiny pinprick of a hole, like from the third into the fourth, like as a human creation, and yet portals can naturally exist and be there and stay there from one dimension to another?
Because you could spend a month on a chalkboard writing math out and not get it. Just because a motor car has a huge engine, a big engine, doesn't necessarily mean it will go faster than a vehicle with a smaller engine. So it's a combination of unlimited power, or well, with a lot of power before it becomes limited, and the software to be able to, in real time, to deal with it, and for operators who, frankly, are very advanced humans, and a concept which you haven't got from 10 years of writing on a chalkboard, the concept of how to work it. You know, we see things in the films, and I love it when, you know, and it was in when the Earth stood still, where the guy had been working for weeks and months and years on his chalkboard, and then the alien comes in and just rubs it out and goes, choo, 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 there you go, try that. But that's the truth. If you live in an anthill, you believe that the roof is the end of your world. If by some accident a big eagle comes and pokes a hole in the top of your anthill, and you look out and you see the sun or the clouds or the stars, you suddenly realize that the world you're in is not artificial in that sense, but is limited, and there's a lot more to the world. So humans are like that. They are in a construct which, if you break through it, offers you more opportunity, because you've got to A, realize something out there is bigger, but B, you've got to say, how do I take that with what I've got in the mechanics and the electronics, and how do I make something that I wouldn't have made yesterday until I found that? And that's why humans are so valued, because you give a monkey, I'm not being rude, you go to the zoo and you give a monkey something, it will play with it for hours and try and see what it can do with it. And humans are a bit like that. You give a human something, you gift them a piece of technology, and they will spend for hours, and we're very clever, and we're renowned throughout the multiverse for being able to come up with things. We're creators, you see, and a lot of these cloned beings are not creators, they're just copiers. So that's one of the reasons that we fascinate these beings so much.
Okay, thank you. I think we've been recording for about an hour and 20 minutes, something like that. So I
We'll
think
go on for another 10 minutes, and then we've done an hour and a
yeah,
half.
okay. So
Unless you're both tired.
we'll do a few more questions. I just wanted to, Chris, if this is okay with you, I wanted to do the spiritual portals, like dates like 11/11 and 8/8, and also the questions, what does it feel like to go through a portal?
Right, can we just do one at a time,
What
because I'm going to
happens to
forget
our
it.
bodies? Yeah, they're the
Just,
ones
can
I
we
want
just
to do.
do one at a time? So the first
Okay.
question, I forgot what the first one again. What was the first one?
First one is what are spiritual portals or energy
Okay,
portals, and
right. So
how do they
when,
affect your consciousness? And we're
all
talking
right,
about
okay.
dates
No,
like
don't.
11 or 12th of
Right.
December
Well,
or
there are two ways of doing it. One is the human one, where thousands, well, I say human, thousands, millions of years ago, something was sent in future to activate at a set time. So when we come through that time, we're now in the time where that will activate. Okay, so you have to have what we call time travel. But also, if a planet has consciousness, and Earth does, it will have set itself development targets or developmental targets, which means that at a certain time, at a certain place, something will happen, because without that happening, you know, the Earth can't develop or can't move forward. And this is the bit that is so exciting, that, you know, the Earth or somebody will know that at certain time, certain place, someone's going to be here, so we need to do this, and then that happens and that happens, which is just wonderful and looks to be totally coincidental, but of course is not. So certain numbers are frequency, and if you have certain numbers, that sets up a frequency. You don't have to make a noise, just the writing of the numbers or saying the numbers creates a temporal distortion, which then allows possibly for a portal, but also allows things to happen. So this really now beginning to fall into the realms of what some people call magic. It's not, it's science and technology, but it's very hard to measure and very hard to manage, and really is the purview of the secret societies and the highest level of the United States military and one or two others. So that's the first bit. What was the second one you were asking?
I'll hand over to Chris.
No, there was another bit that you said. You asked about.
Well, the other bit was actually two other questions, and that's what does it feel like to go through a portal?
Yeah, you asked them, so we need to answer them.
Okay.
Well, when it's happened to me, most occasions you feel a slight resistance. On one occasion, I was physically sick because the frequency vibration that was used was clearly not as good as normal. Most people who do that would report going through a barrier, but as in my case as well, the majority of people say, I don't actually remember passing through the wall. It seems to be blanked. And that's because you have to be taken out of that one phase, go through the physical world. It's a bit like running an old-fashioned film with the black and white negatives, and then getting a pair of scissors and then cutting that out and then rejoining it. Well, where's that bit gone? Well, it wasn't recorded. It wasn't recorded. So often a lot of people will say, don't remember going through the wall in the apartment or the house, or going through the wall in the spaceship. I probably remember only about 3 or 4 times. And on those occasions, it's just like, I can't say it's like water, it's much less than that. And it's very quickly over, but it's definitely a feel of resistance. And on one occasion, they got the frequency wrong and I was not very well. So that answers that one. You had one more question on that. What
I'll hand over to Chris to
okay, all right.
Final
Okay.
question.
Go on then.
Okay, so some people have shared stories of seeing doorways, and there's another question where someone wrote they've seen a star that's come down real close and then gone back and come down close again and disappeared. Are these portals?
Right, the doorway is. It's an absolutely artificially created portal to play to the mind of the person seeing it. If I was an Eskimo, you wouldn't show me a door that you get in America. You'd show me a circle. So you would show the target, the object, the target of your interaction, something that they would recognize as a doorway. Well, that's an artificial one, and that is that. Sometimes source can interact, and again, it's trying to show you something that you recognize to give you the choice. It's a doorway. Do I go through it or do I not go through it? So on that strength alone, we couldn't tell who was behind it. It could be source. It could be an alien. That was that. What was the other question? You just asked about two.
So someone who saw a star that appeared and disappeared and came close and went down.
Okay, no, that's not a portal. That's a spacecraft. More likely to be non-human. The humans wouldn't really want to engage with another human on the Earth in that fashion. That wouldn't be the way they would do it. when secret military want to engage with humans, they'll use helicopters, traditional helicopters. They will not use alien craft because time is money when you're on the Earth. And every time one of these special missions goes up, it's millions and millions of dollars in cost, etc. And that's how the humans think about it. So you wouldn't waste your time like that. But what happens is that I'd say to everybody, we have in paleontology, in fossil collecting, or what the Americans call rock hounding, we have a little saying, which is any fossil that makes it into the fossil record is a winner. Now, how that works with what I'm just talking about is anybody who sees what you've described to me, that person is a winner, because the cloaking device has been turned off that craft. All craft, whatever dimension it's in, that is contracted to come to Earth and do a job, has emitters around the craft or inside the craft, which pass through the wall, which create the frequency of what we would call infrared, deliberately, so that humans can't see it. So the amount of spacecraft out there, which we just don't see because they're all in infrared, is immense. So when they switch the infrared off, they don't do it because they're saving power. They're doing it because you were meant to see that. You were meant to see it. Why were you meant to see it? Because they are already in tune with your consciousness. They are reading your minds. And so what will happen is they will switch off the infrared. You'll see the spacecraft. But then what they'll do is they'll power it. Now, most spacecraft, although the power emitters in the primitive ones are very obvious standalone units, the more advanced craft use the actual shell of the craft, the actual metal of the craft, as the motivator, the mover of that craft. So they glow, and depending on the amount of energy you put into it, it can either just glow faintly or it can become like a bright star, literally. So anything that moves forwards and backwards is playing with you, and it wants you to see it, and it wants you to start asking yourself, what have I seen? What does that mean? And it's their way of engaging with you for who knows what. But the individual should know. The individual should know. If the individual doesn't know, they haven't yet reached a point where, that they've worked it out yet. So no, it's not a portal. That's a spacecraft.
Okay, thank you very, very much.
Pleasure.
We've covered a wide range of different questions on portals, and I do hope that our viewers enjoy this podcast, and it'll probably generate a whole load more questions. So,
forgive me. You've got 2 months on this, haven't we? And what I love about it is that it's the members' questions. We could get a whole bank of experts who could put questions, and I'm sure they would be as good or better or as good as. But there's something about a person who's had a question in their mind and they've never been able to find the answers. Well, what does Simon think? What does he say? And to actually get that answered, it values people. It shows that we actually care about what they want, and we try to do what they want, shall we say. And it's a way of engaging with our membership. So I've always enjoyed it. And when I do radio shows, I don't like to be interviewed by, except Kerry Cassidy. She's different. she's great. I don't like to be interviewed by people who give me all their questions that they've got, because if you have an audience, then ask them what do they want. And so I much prefer it when I get interviewed by other people, that they have a percentage, shall we say, of questions that have been put on the chat or have written in. And to me, that's engaging with your audience. And that's what I hope that we try to do here. So yeah, I hope people love it. I hope they enjoy it. I hope it really gets them to go away and remember some of the things I've said will be absolutely at odds with what people perhaps have heard on YouTube or someone else has said. And so, you know, just ask yourself which seems right to you. So that's my take on it. And so that's really where I come from.
Thank you.
Thank you.